Welcome to this explainer. Okay, I am absolutely thrilled you're here today because we're going to unpack something so incredibly ordinary, literally so mundane, that you probably have one sitting right next to you right now. But as we're going to see, this everyday object is hiding a massive, deep ocean of psychological and philosophical secrets. We're talking about human striding. Specifically, that fascinating, endless cycle of our daily tasks.
So, can humans ever truly feel finished? Man, that hits right at the core, doesn't it? If you have ever felt that creeping sense of guilt when you snap your laptop shut for the night, or, that lingering anxiety on a Sunday afternoon just thinking about all the things you didn't quite get to, listen, you are definitely not alone. Our lives are practically defined by this never-ending stream of things we just have to do, to fix, to remember, to improve.
Okay, let's dive into this. Section 1. The to-do list trap. Symbolism and identity. We all rely on to-do lists, right? We treat them as these simple, practical tools for productivity, like it's just a harmless piece of paper. Well, actually, our source material reveals that these lists symbolize something way heavier. They are literally physical manifestations of our ambition and our anxiety. They represent this desperate need for control we have, our chronic state of incompletion, and honestly, perhaps most importantly, our modern identity. Today, we kind of just define who we are by what we manage to achieve and exactly how efficiently we get it all done.
And this brilliantly illustrates the grand civilizational scale of what's really happening here. It's actually profound. When you jot down buy groceries or, reply to emails, you aren't just organizing your afternoon. On a psychological level, you are engaging in humanity's ongoing attempt to impose some sense of order onto the infinite chaotic possibility of life. You're basically putting a fence around a tiny little piece of reality just so you can feel a sense of mastery over it.
Moving right along to Section 2, Mind and Incompletion. The Zeigarnik Effect.
So that's the grand philosophical scale. But what is actually happening inside our brains? Well, if you've ever wondered why you just can't stop thinking about work while you're staring at the ceiling trying to fall asleep, here is your answer. It's called the Zeigarnik Effect. This is the mind's inherent bias toward incompletion. Basically, your brain intensely dislikes unresolved tension. Because it craves closure, it practically forces unfinished tasks to completely dominate your active memory. We are literally, biologically wired to hold on to the incomplete.
And the real-world symptoms of this effect? Oh, we experience them every single day. We're talking about those intrusive thoughts popping up right in the middle of dinner, or the emotional weight of an unfinished conversation just lingering for days. It's that paralyzing procrastination and that constant underlying hum of chronic anxiety. You know that unfinished email you left in your drafts? Yeah. It is quite literally preventing your brain from experiencing true restorative rest. Crazy, right?
So the crucial point to take away from this is, when we make a list, we are externalizing our memory. We take the burden off our brains to reduce that cognitive overload, which sure, gives us a temporary feeling of relief and control. But because of that Zeigarnik effect we just talked about, the overarching result is that we become psychologically haunted by what remains undone. Think about it. The very tool we use to ease our minds actually creates a persistent, nagging presence in our consciousness.
All right, let's look at the bigger picture. Section 3, Philosophy of Lists, Origin of Culture. Let's zoom out even further. The famous philosopher and author Umberto Eco made this truly profound assertion. He said, "The list is the origin of culture." Now that completely flips how we view our everyday task management. Lists aren't just these modern traps streamed up by corporate hustle culture, they are the foundational tools of civilization itself. Bureaucracy, human memory, and massive knowledge systems were all built entirely on the fundamental human act of just listing things out.
According to this framework, listing is essentially a basic human survival mechanism. A list attempts to do 5 key things: classify the unknown, contain the sprawling nature of reality, prioritize what keeps us alive or moving forward, control our immediate environment, and remember crucial information. It is, without a doubt, our ultimate defense mechanism against the sheer chaos of reality.
Which brings us to a genuinely challenging question. Think about your own daily habits for a second here. Do we constantly organize, sort, and list out our lives simply because reality itself feels way too overwhelming to face head-on without a filter?
Let's dig into that tension. Section 4, Productivity versus Meaning, the Modern Conflict. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is how this philosophical tension creates major ripples in our modern lives.
It pits two completely different ways of living right against each other. On one side, we have our culturally celebrated values, right? Efficiency, structure, output. We just love getting things done. But on the exact opposite side, we have spontaneity, presence, and meaning. The source material points out a major conflict here. Living a highly optimized life where literally every single minute is scheduled and tracked, well, it might actually actively weaken our spontaneity and our ability to just exist in the present moment. And this is the ultimate ethical dilemma of our modern hustle culture. If we are constantly measuring our lives through task completion and this endless loop of self-improvement, we risk tying our actual human dignity strictly to our achievements. The danger here is super profound. We start treating ourselves as projects to be managed and optimized rather than, actual human beings to be experienced.
And unfortunately, there is a whole industry built specifically on exploiting this exact vulnerability. The modern attention economy. So the apps on your phone, the productivity software you use every day, they actively monetize your anxiety. They are weaponizing that Zeigarnik effect we talked about earlier. By hitting you with endless notifications and these infinite engagement loops, they make absolutely sure you always feel like there's an unfinished task just waiting for you. They keep you hooked by keeping you anxious. It's a real trap.
So how do we break out of this? Let's move to Section 5. Rethink the unfinished, a practical shift. Let's see how this builds into a real, practical shift. How do we actually escape this cycle? Well, humans naturally have a negativity bias, right? We remember our failures and the things we didn't get done way more clearly than our actual accomplishments. A standard to-do list totally triggers this bias. It amplifies our guilt and self-criticism because, let's face it, there's almost always something left over at the end of the day. But shifting to a done list, where you intentionally track what you have actually accomplished, completely flips the paradigm. It reinforces your progress and actively fights back against that inner critic, which ultimately leads to vastly improved mental well-being and satisfaction.
Ultimately, this brings us to the core tension of our entire explainer today. We really have to ask ourselves, does organizing life make life meaningful, or does it merely make it manageable? By choosing constant, relentless optimization, we might be gaining a lot of structure, sure, but we might be sacrificing our mental health and our deeper sense of fulfillment in the process. I want to leave you with this final, truly provocative thought. In a world where our goals continuously expand and where human striving literally never, ever ends, many of us feel intensely guilty when we aren't being productive. But if the tasks are infinite, should you really have to justify rest? Just think about that the next time you look at your to-do list. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and I really hope it changes the way you view your everyday tasks.